Michael, a very well welcome to today's interview. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah, it's absolutely my pleasure to be with you guys today, Silvan. I look forward to our conversation.
Let's quickly introduce you. You are an SPC 5 certified trainer and also a release train engineer at Travelport, a company that is known for providing its technology solutions for the travel and tourism industry. Before we dive into your journey, we want to know where it all started. So please tell us a bit more about your SAFE journey. When did you get started? How many teams, how many arts do you have today?
Oh, yeah, sure. Be glad to. Um, well, it's probably been, pardon me, it's been 3.5 years, I suppose, maybe four, when our organization is a legacy waterfall organization. It's been around for a long time. We've tried any number of flavors of agile over the course of maybe 10, 12 years. And about 4.5 years ago, we had a change of leadership who said, hey, this SAFE methodology is something we should investigate. And so we did. And, the organization as a whole made the decision, start the transformation. And it took a little while to go through the various plannings and trainings to get prepared. We launched two trains right out the chute. And now we have 13 arts. So we've really grown and adopted it for me myself. It's probably 2019. 2 years ago now, I started doing all the trainings, getting prepared in the first quarter of 2019 for our launch. We launched in the sixth program increment. We do 10-week program increments. So we launched in the sixth, and we're just about to do PI 15 right now, which will be our 10th PI planning as an art. So we are fully immersed in the methodology.
Wow, that's an impressive and great journey. I'm sure you have some great lessons to share along today's interview. I also wonder how you actually grew to that number. You said you started with two trains, now you're at 13. How do you manage that growth? And also, what was the reason for the expansion, basically?
Absolutely. There was some ideal arts who were very much involved in what I would consider, newer technology. So they were selected right out of the chute to get us started, and just to see how the adoption would go, to see how we could integrate that within our company. We have about 3,000 developers, and so when we're spread out all over the world, and so our particular art is we are focused on software, which is the probably the most mainframe legacy platform. We are the core area, PNRs and transactions, ticketings, those hearts and guts, and so we were probably not the most ideal from a technology point of view, but even from a personnel point of view, if you can imagine, our folks were, as far as they were concerned, SAFE was just the next flavor of the month, if you will, as an agile transformation. Our folks are some veteran folks, been around maybe 25, 30 years. And, they feel like we did our own development. We did it well. And what's the reason for change? So that's the reason we were not the ideal candidate. And the reason we've grown and crescendoed so tremendously is because it is actually working for Travelport. We been growing, I suppose, maybe at least one train, maybe two every PI along the way. And as I said, we came in about PI 6, even maybe last summer, the last 2 or 3. So, that's grown us to where the majority of our developers right now are doing using the SAFE methodology.
So it seems that SAFE is here to stay. And I would also like to highlight or talk about a specific event that you actually see or happens regularly during your SAFE journey. That's the PI planning. And I just wonder, what relevance has the PI planning for you and also your teams as an event? Can you share a bit more insights here?
Well, I certainly can. We are going to do, as I said, PI 15 for us. Our 10th PI planning is actually starting next Tuesday. So it's a big thing for us. We have been, at first, as you can imagine, it was a real difficult proposition. Now we're getting pretty good at it. We definitely take advantage of laying out our work, understanding what features that we're going to be doing over the next 10 weeks, and it's working very well. The teams come prepared. Um, we work very closely with our product side, who get the what in order, the features, and we have a really good engagement with our business owners. So we have a really great, and not all of our arts have that, as a matter of fact. So that's probably one of the most important things to have, is that interface back to your business, who can outline the vision, outline where we're going as a company, what our goals are, what we're trying to do to make money. And then the product folks take that and put together our backlog list. And then the technical teams grab that up and then plan out our 10-week increment.
Fantastic. And we also know that you have already been doing remote PI plannings even before COVID-19 hit. So you are really perceived as a sort of a pioneer in the safe ecosystem. And we all know that the travel industry has been heavily affected by the corona pandemic. And I just wonder, in what way has that actually affected you and your PI plannings, if at all?
Oh, it's been a big impact for certain. Well, as you pointed out, I have on our art, we have a global force. We have at least two major development teams offshore in India, and then we have a variety of our product and even other developers and leaders spread across Europe in various locations. Ireland, London, Italy, Spain, Portugal. We have a team in Romania. So we've always had a distributed workforce. So even when we were doing PI planning in mass, we had a major production center, a lot like what I'm seeing here in your environment. We had cameras, microphones, a big room. We would create big rooms in both Chennai and Gurgaon, and then everybody in Europe traveled to Denver. So we had the three main production spots where everyone was together, and then we were always somewhat remote in that regard. So we didn't have 100% of our workforce all in the same place. So that presented us some challenges at front, trying to get used to how to engage folks, inspect and adapt, make sure that everybody felt a participant. The technology of managing, videos and audios and WebExes and things for the breakouts was somewhat of a challenge. And as we learned how to do that, well, as you said, you might see a few videos in this in the SAFE training, because the SAFE folks were really interested in how we did this. In other words, very large enterprises don't always have the ability to plan in the same place as we did. Visas or just simply traveling expenses. It was impossible to get everybody in the same place. And then when the COVID hit, well, that was a huge, huge challenge for us. As we started to realize that the next PI planning, we may be on lockdown. What is our fallback position? How are we going to do this? They're already telling us that we can only have 25 people, for instance, in the large room in Denver, and the other countries were starting to shut down. So we started to scramble and make a plan. And basically what we're doing now is the same thing you and I are doing here. Every single person is remote to the production, if you will. So just as simple as this, they see my face, I get us started, we welcome us into a video, a webcam, and then what we do is each of the participants, much the same way as they would walk up and get in front of the camera, while they get on screen, do their thing, and then all the teams break out into individual web sessions, and we bounce around as leadership team to get in and out of different places. And what we found almost immediately was the teams themselves felt the level of engagement actually went up instead of going down, which was interesting, in as much as our thought was it would be really hard. We would be less productive. And it turned out that it actually leveled the playing field. So if you can imagine that we had this site in Denver, that would seem to be the nucleus. That was like where everything was happening. And so our other two locations in Gurgaon and Chennai, even though they were all together, they had a sense that, well, I'm kind of an outsider, not really in the room. I don't know if I'll raise my hand. And then when we went to WebEx, to that platform, everyone felt like the playing field was level. In other words, you're no different than I am. We're all simply dialed into this call. And so it pulled the veil back on this pretend wall that separated us. And we increased the engagement across the art. And that's what we've really found. We've even had folks answer survey and say, I don't ever want to go back to the other way we were doing it.
That's really impressive. And I think you touch on a very important point here, that going fully remote can actually be a huge advantage for you and your whole organization, as you just described. I think that's just an incredible journey and also great learning. In order to have successful remote PI plannings, what you also need is the right tool set, right? So I just wonder, what tools, what software, what solutions do you use across your PI plannings to make them a success?
Well, this is my good chance to say the RenTouch tool has been a huge benefit to us. It provides us that single program board space. It's an opportunity that we can, for me personally, I can take a peek in on what the folks are doing without actually being in their physical space. And then as far as a recent upgrade we've had, we've integrated, we use the Jira tool to manage our stories and manage the work through the execution phase of the PI. And so when y'all provided us that automated interface, why that was really a big win for us. If you can imagine all the manual effort that took place from the program board, in the previous day, there'd be stickies on it, there'd be yarn on it. We would take pictures of it. We would try hard, and depending upon depending upon just the handwriting skills of an individual to try to read these things from your camera photo and get this all put into our automated tools. Well, today with the RenTouch tool and what we're using, it is all done for us. There is no doubt about it. Folks type in what they got, it interfaces back. It used to be a big, huge ask. We would end up on Thursday finishing the PI planning, and then the ask was, hey, get it all put in by tomorrow so that it's all loaded up and ready to go. And now it's just immediately available. That's been our hugest collaboration tool. We take advantage of breakout sessions in the we use WebEx. However, you can do this with Zoom or any of the other technologies. Create breakout rooms so that each team gets into their breakout space. We do all of the ceremonies via webcam, obviously. So whether it's the management review, the draft plan reviews, the Fist of Five voting, that's one thing that's a little bit different. we don't do the same way, since we can't see all 125 people's fist of 5 votes. So we kind of do it more like a marriage. If you have any objections to this plan, speak now or forever hold your peace, something like that. And so that engages the dialogue. But yeah, we use the WebEx tools and make that work for us.
Fantastic. And I also wonder, how do you actually prepare your train to conduct the first remote PI planning or PI plannings in generally in a remote setting? What can you recommend, in order to get them ready, up and running and prepared for such an event?
Boy, in the beginning, we were rough. My encouragement would be, I'm a baseball player. Here's where I'm going to pull the bat out for you and say I'm a baseball player. And so to take a bunch of folks who have done something potentially for their whole entire lives and suggest to them that they have to start new. That was like going back to kindergarten or T-ball. And that is really where we put our expectations, okay? In other words, let's take the trainings. Let's do our best to prepare a backlog. Let's have the PI planning. Let's try to stand up the art. And then we set a very low bar of our expectations. In other words, just as with the T-ballers, sometimes your kiddos, they will run the wrong way around the bases after they hit the ball. And we was going to cheer our team no matter what they did. And the whole idea, just like with the T-ballers, at the end of it, we're going to give you ice cream and we're going to hope you come back tomorrow and do it again. And that's what we found. Our very first PI, we stood it up, made lots of mistakes, we had lots of good learnings. We finished the PI. The second PI was marginally better. And now, after 10 PIs, we're really starting to take on some of the more mature aspects of our evolution. You asked about preparing for a PI. Big part of the preparation is the backlog. Our very first PI, the backlog came together almost on day 1 of the PI. And now we're working with our product folks to prepare backlogs, refine them, socialize them, WSGIF them, all those things in a much more mature way. And so we were taking on very specific challenges. So a lot like a baseball player, we wouldn't consider ourselves professional level yet, but we certainly are a long way from T-ball.
Got it. In that regard, you mentioned the backlog readiness is an important thing or part of the whole preparation aspect for PI planning. I just wonder, how do you actually get that done and also get that done in a successful way? So how do you make sure that the teams and the people in the teams are actually ready and aware what features are in there and what's expecting them?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. As I said, at first, there was lots of confusion, lots of lot of issues. So after a couple of PIs, maybe 3 or 4 during our inspect and adapt, one of the ideas that bubbled up and was voted on very high was just what you just said. Our teams are not getting presented the backlogs soon enough. We can't do any sort of research whatsoever to even know what you're asking us to do, let alone understand dependencies or which other arts or other teams I need to work with. I mean, I literally have not even had enough time to spend 5 minutes opening the program up that you want me to update to see what's going on. How is it that we can get this sooner? And so at that point in time, our root cause was, we're not getting these features socialized to the teams or our business owners soon enough. And so we created we didn't make it rigid, but we made it informal. But we set up milestones. Hey, by the end of the second iteration, that's after about 4 weeks, we want to start seeing the product folks have a backlog. Maybe it's not 100%, but start to have at least the 75% of the things that you know you're going to do. Have them starting to come together, refine them, have them in a place. Do that refinement over a couple of weeks and beef up your backlog to where it becomes, let's just say, we always know that something's going to come in at the last minute. That's impossible. We're in the computer business. That's what we do. We come up with ideas at the very last second. However, once we've got that to that point, then what we want to do is we want to socialize that to our business owners and our teams so that they can provide due diligence and actually go and ask some of the hard questions. Well, what does this really mean? Or do you understand that this involves these other teams? Are they going to be able to support us so that we can integrate together and understand our dependencies? And then, of course, we do the WSGIF session. And the goal is to usually do that a couple of weeks prior to PI planning so that we have our feature list put together. We understand what we're going to do. That's the dream. That's the goal. Our particular art, we're like cats. Every single art, if there's 13 different arts, they all have their own personality. And within our art, we have 8 different teams. And so we have a suite of product managers, and they all have somewhat different approaches to it. And what we're finding now is we are really now coming to a point where some still put it off till the last minute. Some still don't have their lists quite as refined or socialized. And what we're finding is we have now finally got the tummy, if that makes sense. We finally now have an appetite as a product and business and as a leadership organization to say, okay, we've tried to make it not too firm, a little bit, take it as you will. And now we're going to really firm this up. We're going to set some milestone type of goals. Now, you are going to have your backlog put together by such and so. You do need to have these socializations, these question and answers, because what we're finding still is we'll show up for the WSGIF session and there's too many questions. We'll eat up the entire hour just trying to understand what it is we're going to, and then they'll want to rush and do all the scoring and things like that. And so now we're really, even today, today's Friday, we're PI planning next Tuesday. I just got off one of the sessions and I just literally dropped at the top of the hour to join you. And they weren't quite done yet. So in other words, our product folks, our business folks, they're now seeing the lights come on in these mature ways. So again, dialing back to what you said, what kind of advice do I give to the folks just getting started? Have patience, understand that this journey will take time. We are literally in our 10th PI. We're 2 years into it as an art, and we're still finding ways to do what it is that SAFE would suggest. We're evolving, we're adapting, we're learning, we're taking what we learned in the last PI and bringing it forward. Don't be discouraged or be disheartened if the very first one doesn't seem to go as like you would read in the book.
But I think that's important to share and also to acknowledge that, it's a journey, it's constant improvement, and that's the right spirit that you are just showing and talking about right here. That's the way to go. And a very important recipe for success. And on top of that, another important recipe for a successful PI planning is also the participation of your leadership team. So I just wonder, how do you involve your leadership at Travelport, at your art, to also have them in the actual PI planning?
Oh, that is a great question. Great question. Especially for legacy companies. So, which I am, you can imagine that you have leaders who have spent decades to become successful, and they have used and employed a particular style. And that is something that they're not just comforted by this. They are secured by this. This is what's provided them their success in their careers. It's provided their organizational success. And so to take and say, oh no, now we're going to do things like this. We're not doing it like that anymore. We're going to do it like this. That's hard. If you can imagine, some of the leadership said, oh, this is just the flavor of the month. 6 months from now, these folks are all going to be gone. We're just going to do it our way anyway. And we were kind of like that in a way. Like I said, we're a legacy group. We have lots of folks that have been around for 20, 30 years. And so at first, it was a little difficult as a leadership team. Our leadership team expands beyond the typical troika. We do have the troika, the RTE, the product manager, the system architect. We also include a development manager. We also include our consulting firm has a member on our leadership. We also include quality assurance on our leadership. So we have a larger leadership team. This is probably 8 or 9 folks now, a couple of vice presidents. Pardon me. What we've found over time is we've really ensured to do no harm, encourage what I call spirited conversation. In other words, if you and I disagree, let's talk this through. Help me to understand where you're coming from. I'll understand, and I'll help you understand where I'm coming from. And then we can make a collaborative type of decision. The last thing that I want to be as an RTE is some kind of a dictator. Okay, this is how I read it in the book. This is how we're going to do it. This is what's going to happen. And get a lot of pushback at first. And so we kind of changed that up a little bit, tried to be a little bit more understanding of that evolution, tried to be more collaborative. And now as an RTE, I'm more like maybe the Chief Justice on the Supreme Court, if you're familiar. In other words, if it's indeed a 4-4 tie, and somebody has to make the decision because that's just where we're at, then as an RTE, I'll step forward and say, okay, this is how we're going to do it. But normally we end up with gaining a consensus around what it is that we want to do. And that has been a really big win for us. As I said, the arts are all like cats. All the different leadership groups are different. I've had compliments from some of the folks who have joined. As a family, we grow. So we're not the same group of people that are when we started 2 years ago. So as some folks have come in and joined our organization as the leadership level, and I've referred to these spirited conversations, one of the folks said, that was an interesting term, spirited conversation. When I think of a spirited conversation, I've seen some of these groups, really get after each other, hang up on one another, really have some really hard talks, and then some disagreements that allow them not to have unity. This is something that is big, very important, because as I said, remember, your leadership folks have been successful making decisions. And one of the big tenets of SAFE is to decentralize the decisions. And so trying to get them to release the command and control and become a collaborative part of the art. Allow, for instance, our programmers to actually stand up at an inspect and adapt and say, how am I supposed to tell my boss that that's the wrong thing to do? And it's like, well, if you would have done that, it would have saved us 2 hours of 85 people sitting around while your team went back and replanned. If you would have just told your boss 2 days ago that was not a very good idea, you would have saved us all kinds of money. We would have built a statue to you. And so getting that cultural change to where the decentralization of decisions building a leadership team who supports the art in those decisions, who makes the decisions like SAFE would suggest, those big, long-lasting decisions that you don't change very often. Well, then those are the ones that the leadership team takes on. As vice versa, the things that have to do with the delivery of what we're trying to get accomplished, why then we've encouraged them, hey, let's let the team decide exactly how and when they're going to deliver that.
I really like that philosophy. I think that's a great wrap up here. One thing, now we talked a lot about the PI planning itself, but one thing I'm also particularly interested in, Michael, is what results of the actual PI planning do you also refer back to or even go back to with your teams during the actual PI, the execution phase then? Do you go back to any program boards, risk boards? Do you use any of that for your Scrum of Scrums? How do you practice that at Travelport?
Oh, absolutely. The program board is the major output from PI planning. So we use that throughout the course of the execution. So our Scrum of Scrums talks specifically to the program board. We map the dependencies. We have an open dialogue. So if you have a dependency, if I have a dependency on you, I'm not relying on your emails to me. I'm opening and engaging myself in a verbal conversation with you on a weekly basis so that I can show up at Scrum of Scrums as a Scrum Master and I can say with clarity, this dependency is now a blocker or this dependency is not a problem. Things like the risk board comes forward because, obviously we're managing risks. The folks who own the risks have to speak up to them. We want to make sure that if we've identified a risk, we don't just go ahead and ignore it, right? Things that come up through the course of it, we do the retro during the PI planning. So we have a retro board, what went well, not so well, what needs to be improved. When we go through the retro board, we basically do that. We just read it out. By the end of the PI, nobody has any more tummy left for, okay, let's try to work this out. I mean, they've just spent, in our case, 3 exhausting days doing PI planning. We've just had the vote. Everyone's very excited. I'm ready to go, I'm ready to go party or have dinner with my family or come out of this experience. So that's a big important thing for the leadership team. We take that retro board into our very first leadership meeting and we walk through it. We talk about it. We talk about what are the things that we could change or what are the things that we want to be encouraged by. So those are the main artifacts that we take out of PI planning. And then, of course, the objectives get system demoed every 2 weeks. We use that in the final inspect and adapt to pull together our actual business values and look at predictability. So those are the things those are the main things that we focus on.
I like that a lot. Great setup. And I also wonder in that regard, how does a team actually find out that a requested dependency from another team can actually not be delivered? How do you deal with that potential issue that you only face during the actual PI after the planning?
Right. As I said about the dependencies, those are managed at the team. Okay. So I don't follow up on them unless it's escalated. In other words, if you have a dependency on another team and you are, as a Scrum Master, are engaging with them on a regular basis, how is this coming? I have one for you, you have one for me. If for a fact that we have a problem and then I get involved, well, then I engage the other RTE. Usually within our own team, it comes up in Scrum of Scrums. So I have a lot of visibility into that conversation. For instance, some of the folks we count on the Scrum of Scrums as that's the one place where if I've not been able to catch you this last week verbally, this is my chance to now have that conversation. And so I have a little more visibility into it within our art. But if it's across art, as you know, we have 13 arts now. And so now we have a lot of dependencies, which are from train to train. And so if it gets raised to me, then I engage with the other RTEs and we see, we do just what we're supposed to do. How can we drive out the blocker? What's really the root cause of this? What adjustments can we make? So dependencies within the team and across the team, collaboration and communication. Communicate. That is the way to ensure that you're not going to just get burned in the 11th hour.
Absolutely. So now we talked about your impressive journey, but we are also equally interested about your outlook for the future. So from your perspective, do you think that remote PI plannings are here to stay?
I think remote PI plannings are here to stay. That's my personal opinion. What I would like to see happen, and this is the input I give into the RTE community of practice here at Travelport, is maybe once a year we should do, if we are able to come back, when and if we are able to come back to our offices, maybe on an annual basis. There's huge expense. There's huge expense to doing these in person. We've wiped that expense out. As you know, the travel industry is hemorrhaging money. We're an airline. We support the airlines and the hospitality venues across this planet. And so, people aren't traveling like they were. So our company itself will have to make a serious decision about how we would do this from a financial point of view. When and if we can do it, do we even want to do it based on the cost? And my recommendation is, we want to do this on an annual basis. There is something that gets created by the bonds we create physically. Okay. In other words, you and I, we just met each other today on this Zoom call. If our only interaction is only this Zoom call, once it goes dark, that's the end of it for you and I. Why, that's different than rubbing elbows as we walk around from room to room, going out and having dinner at the end of the evening and hanging out together. And so for the folks, the RTEs that are just starting, and this is their only very first experience, I think it's a disadvantage, because building that personal affinity, you and I together, is a little bit easier in one-on-one. We had 10 minutes or so to talk a little bit before we started this interview and get to know one another. But if there's 100 people on your art, that's hard. That's really hard and difficult for you as an RTE, because that's your job. Your job is to know everybody. Your job is to understand your particular needs, wants, growths, whether it's from your career, whether it's out of the art, and they're all different. I've got vice presidents, I've got technicians, I got product directors, I got product owners, I have all these variable different things. And so it's, when someone can just walk past me, and you can imagine how exhausting that might have been, as opposed to now when the folks go off to their break-offs, I'm kind of just sitting here by myself in my home studio. And when I'm on site, I don't walk 5 feet or even get away from the desk. Well, there might be 5 people around me wanting to ask different questions or stop me in the hall as I go. And so that's why I think it'll be important for us, that at least that's my input. We need to meet periodically face to face so that we can build those personal bonds. That means, hey, when I dial the phone or hit you with an instant message, you're going to say, oh, that's Michael, I want to respond to him. Okay. Whereas you might be inclined to say, I only met him. He seems kind of gruff. I don't know that I'm going to want to engage in him. They've never had a chance to see you in person to say, oh yeah, he comes off a little gruff, but when you get near him, he's just a teddy bear. Don't worry about that. And then you find that in your experience, and how you overcome that. We've overcome some of that by having virtual cafes, doing other things. We've set up breakout sessions where During the breakout session, we might have a cafe here. We might have a yoga group here. We might have another group over here that's talking about their pets. Just any number of ways we've tried to come up with creative ways to create these platforms so that you and I can get to know one another and be able to build a relationship that we can build trust and loyalty.
Absolutely. So it will be a combination of both, right? The remote setting, but also don't miss out on the in-person experience.
Without question, without
That makes
question.
sense. And to conclude today's interview, I have 5 very short rapid fire questions for you. You can answer between 1 sentence and 1 word, okay?
I love it.
Perfect. Let's start. So, risk, dependency, feature, or user story sticky, which one you choose?
Feature sticky.
Perfect. And what is your favorite board?
My favorite what?
Your favorite board, like the program board, the team board, the risk board, the program backlog board. What's your favorite?
My favorite board is the retro board. And my 1 sentence is, now that we've gone remote, I never see any more stickies about how the food was.
If you had to make a choice, Microsoft Teams, Zoom, or WebEx?
I like Microsoft Teams. We use WebEx as our platform. I like Microsoft Teams. It's more collaborative, and there is the ability to create meetings.
Fair point. And if you had to make a choice, remote meetings or in-person meetings, like physical meetings?
You've heard that. I think the remote meetings work better for productivity with a periodic in the face-to-face.
Wonderful. I think there's no better way to end this interview. Michael, thank you so much for sharing your impressive journey, and we wish you and Travelport all the best and lots of success for the future. Thank you so much.
Silvan, it has been my absolute pleasure to share with you today. Have a great rest of your day.